David, it's great to see you today.
Good to see you, Jason. Good to be with you.
David, you spent years living in Moscow as one of the top correspondents there, working for U.S. newspaper. And since then, you've written a ton of books about the Putin regime. Your scholarship on Putin is second to none. So let me ask you, a lot of people say that Vladimir Putin rose to power due to the fact that he was killing people in his own country through a series of apartment bombings in Moscow. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that this is the key fact that he came to power as a result of an act of terror against his own people. And now, what his precise role in the conspiracy was, we don't know because it may have been that he became prime minister uh, because the Yeltsin entourage needed someone who would play that role and be willing to go the full measure and carry out such a terrorist act and risk civil war because that's what they were risking if their role was discovered. Now, why do I treat all this as a fact? Because the evidence is overwhelming and incontrovertible. If there were a court of law in a responsible country, uh, the FSB and specific individuals would be found guilty of terrorism. Unfortunately, in Russia, anyone who tried to investigate was murdered, and the relevant information was buried. Anyone from the outside who interested themselves in what happened uh, was stymied by the fact that he couldn't get access to documents, couldn't get access to people, did not have subpoena power. I mean, of all the atrocities that were carried out, the only one that was probably that was investigated in a truly serious manner was the murder of Alexander Litvinenko, and that's because it took place on British soil. But the killings that took place inside Russia are very difficult, and the atrocities are very difficult to uh, to investigate. Nonetheless, the evidence that we have with our limited ability to question people and to compel testimony is still so overwhelming that there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Putin was part of a conspiracy. He he may not have led it from the very beginning, but he was a key member of a conspiracy that involved terrorist acts against Russian people to create a pretext for the Second Chechen War, which would elevate Putin's popularity and make it possible for him to be elected president, and it, as part of a deal in which he would then pardon Yeltsin for Yeltsin's crimes and shield Yeltsin's family and take over as president. The other aspect of the whole thing is that's really blood chilling is the role of Yeltsin because all of us who at one time or another admired Yeltsin for his opposition to Soviet totalitarianism, or so it seemed, uh, are reluctant to entertain the idea that Yeltsin himself gave the go ahead for the bombing of the buildings. And I confess that I'm guilty of this as well. There was a time that I it was convenient to say, well, he was drunk. He was drunk and didn't know what was going on. Well, if that's the case, since he was president of the country and everyone around him was engaged in a terrorist act, he's nonetheless responsible. But I think it goes beyond that. I think that there are indications that he was an integral part of what happened. In On September 8th, he assured Bill Clinton that Putin was going to be the next president. And he said, "Well, he's democratically minded. You should work with him. He'll be good for U.S. Russian relations." The question arises: how could he be so sure that with a popularity rating of 2%, he was able to and with a popularity of 2% that Putin had, that Putin that he could select a successor, and that successor would be successful. Forgetting about all democratic procedures that are supposed to accompany the election of a new president. Well, the next day, the apartment building on Guryanova Street in Moscow was blown up. Um, at on the night of Putin's election, there was a documentary filmmaker who was with Yeltsin and Yeltsin's family. And there's one moment where Yeltsin's grandson when Yeltsin asks, "Who are you voting for?" and the grandson raises a toast of something he was drinking, whatever. 4-year-old child says, "For Putin," and everyone applauds. And Yeltsin himself said that he interviewed 20 people before settling on Putin. Whether that's exaggeration or not, we don't know, but it does indicate that he was involved in the process of choosing this brilliant successor, who, by the way, was under investigation for fraud and embezzlement at the time that Yeltsin chose him. Apparently, that was no impediment. So what we have is someone who, from the very start, was a creature of the corrupt 1990s and was involved in a conspiracy against his own people, in a situation in which the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, in particular, the fact that FSB agents were caught planting a bomb in the basement of a building in Ryazan. In that case, they didn't succeed in blowing up the building, but because someone noted they were seen and their presence was reported. But the modus operandi was identical to that was displayed in the previous 4 bombings.
So, in the murders that occurred with the apartments being blown up, Putin was able to rise to power. But what does he gain with sending hundreds of thousands of his own men today to Ukraine to be maimed or killed? How does that help him?
That's an interesting question. I think that we need to look at the whole pattern of Russian military and foreign policy. The thing that Americans find so difficult to understand is that for Russia, war is an instrument of internal policy. So the first Chechen war began because, as Oleg Lobov, who was head of the Security Council, explained to my friend, the late Sergei Yushchenkov, the president needs a short, victorious war in order to elevate his popularity. The war was neither short nor victorious, but that was the basic motivation. And it was the same technique that was used to put Putin into power. Putin's popularity rating after the apartment bombings, which were blamed on Chechens, and were used to justify a second invasion of Chechnya, soared. He was someone who was not taken seriously by anyone when he became prime minister. And it was open speculation that he would be gone in a few weeks. But that was on the part of people who didn't know what was in store, what was being planned. Once the bombings took place, suddenly Putin, who was known in St. Petersburg as just a gray mouse, was suddenly everywhere, showing all, threatening bloody revenge against those terrorists who would have attacked innocent Russians as they slept. And his popularity rose steadily to the point that he was elected president of Russia. He has been, he calls Zelensky illegitimate. but the Putin regime has been illegitimate from the very first day. There's nothing illegitimate about Zelensky, and it bothers me a bit, and don't have an explanation for it, that the Ukrainian government does not raise this issue when they, in the face of these outrageous statements by the Russians. Uh, Zelensky has the ability to call attention to this, and it's something that would be, strategically important for Ukraine. But I don't, that's for them to consider what their strategy is going to be. But once you've tasted blood, we know from Macbeth, it's easier just to wade further. And Putin developed a real taste for slaughter. Uh, he demonstrated that in the uh, Nordost hostage-taking incident, in which they gassed both terrorists and hostages, the Beslan school massacre, the assassination of opponents such as Boris Nemtsov and Anna Politkovskaya. The shooting down of the Malaysian airliner was a deliberate murder of 300 international air passengers. And now this. And once you are confirmed to the idea that human beings, see, to use President Zelensky's very appropriate expression, are just logs on the fire. What does it matter how many logs you use?
So recognizing this depravity, this heart of darkness, the true evil of Putin, what would you advise American leaders who, for instance, Donald Trump today spoke to Putin for over 2 hours? What would you advise him and his team that they should understand about Putin when trying to negotiate with him?
I mean, I think don't talk to Putin for 2 hours. I mean, that's 2 hours during which Putin can process your brains. Uh, the people who go into negotiations with someone as malevolent as Putin, without the least bit of background and understanding, will have an irresistible tendency to assume that he means what he says, that there's something behind his words, that he has some type of legitimate point of view. And he won't understand the extent to which words in Russia, as they were in the Soviet Union, are detached from any content. They are an instrument. They are a weapon. And in this case, against the extremely inexperienced, naive, and unprincipled people who are now running the U.S.
So at this point, as a final question, what is it do you think that Putin wishes to achieve in Ukraine, and what should we be doing now?
What he wishes to achieve in Ukraine is to crush Ukraine's national independence and reduce it to either part of Russia or a vassal state, totally dependent on Russia, along the lines of Belarus, maybe even less so. That's what he wants. What can be done to prevent it? I think just in dealing with people who have no principles, principles count. Because in the vacuum, the moral vacuum in which they exist, they will recognize the force of someone who's motivated by what he believes in. The problem is that we have a president right now in the US who thinks everything is a deal. And nobody fights for a deal. And Putin will never be convinced that Trump will fight for a deal either. And especially when he can waste lives in unlimited quantities in order to achieve his objectives. So the very fact that we have this kind of transactional mentality and that we are constantly thinking in terms of how much money we can make, how much we're spending, how much this war is costing us, without understanding the underlying principle, encourages Putin to think that in the long run he will prevail because the deal will never be worth in the long run will not be worth it uh, if you don't see the underlying principle.
Absolutely the case. David, I really appreciate your time today and your great insight.
Thank you, Jason. Great to see you.